Kundalini Syndrome. What is it? Where does it come from? There's so much speculation out there about what Kundalini Syndrome is. Loosely, a light version of Kundalini Syndrome we could call Dark Night of the Soul. There are two parts here that we have to pay attention to. One is the level of pain of psychosis and why this can happen. If we are not prepared energetically within the body, if we are not balanced and it rises, then we can cause damage to ourselves. There are many energy techniques, martial art, internal alchemy techniques that teach us this. We can talk in very simple metaphorical terms of the Ida and Bengala. The magnetical and the electrical energies must be balanced. Preparatory work with energy is very important. For most people that work with me, if they've done years of internal alchemy, if they've done years of work, if they've been studying Tantra their entire lives because they were brought up in tantric traditions, awesome, great, we can go fast. But for most people, I say do the 52-week program, because the vast majority of the work at the beginning is the preparatory work, learning to control your energies and move them. Then we have part 2. This is the psychological work. We must also understand here, before we go there, this is not meant for everybody. You find a lot of people who have mental dis-ease, bipolar, schizophrenia, things like this. They are, of course, drawn to this line of work looking for answers. For those type of people, this can be very risky to do. If you're ADHD, you will find it far easier to do this work. ADDers, ADHDers are very connected to the energies. But we have to do things properly. Then we have part 2 of this. This is, we could call it in simple terms, the ego. If we do not do what we can call the energy work, the trauma release, the energy work, the shadow work, the trauma release, all of this, if we do not do this first, as the energy rises, the ego will fight the energy. Because we have to understand what the ego is. The ego is something, everyone says, oh, the ego is bad, we have to dissolve the ego, we have to kill the ego, we have to... Absolute nonsense. The ego is something built into our system. It is a safety mechanism within us that keeps us safe. It is our friend. It will help us if we do this right. The problem is the ego gets programmed subconsciously over time through filters, through beliefs, through external inputs of things we see on the news, through conversations we have with people, through watching television, through subliminal messaging, through so many things. And so that feeds the ego. And so the ego says, so if you're in a negative cycle and if you're in depression, you find it so hard to step outside that because your ego understands depression as the safe space. And most people who've fallen into depression, they've been pushing their ego for too long. Their ego's got to a point saying, this stress you're giving me is too much. I can't handle it. I'm going to shut you down and put you into depression. And then when you're in depression, you get used to it. Your ego keeps you in the depression and you can't break out of it. And it's really difficult to break out of because it's trying to keep you in what you know in this safe space from the program that is currently running. So we have to understand, we have to release all these triggers, all these traumas, all these things. We have to stop that subconscious program controlling the ego. When you go to buy a new car, I say this very often, you go to buy a new car, you want a special car, a different car. I want to buy a red, whatever. And then all of a sudden you see this car. Your ego finds it for you. It gives it to you to say, hey, you're looking for this. I found it for you. And they're like, oh, damn, I thought it was rare. Maybe it's not. Maybe I don't want that one. Maybe I want something else. Okay, or whatever. But your ego gives you what you want. So you have to understand how to program your ego and how to release all those traumas energetically through psychology, through whichever method works for you. Shadow work, feeding your demons, very powerful ways to do it. To open up your ego, to not be controlled by those beliefs, those triggers, those limits, because that bubble will fight any energy rising. It's what leads people to the dark night of the soul and worse. So there are two phases we have to work. The energy, releasing, feeding our demons, the traumas, opening up our system to a point that is non-dualistic. We understand what good and bad is and what it isn't. So our ego knows this. So when the energy rises, our ego doesn't fight. It doesn't cause a challenge. It doesn't cause problems. So we can go further. Where we get to, that will depend on your teacher. That will depend on you to how far you can go. If we talk about Kundalini awakening, we could say the ultimate stage to get to when starting is Shakti Shiva. The divine grace descending on you. However you want to explain it and make it, dress it up. And it is energy and consciousness combining within your system. That's what it is. But first we have to balance the energies, control the energies, keep them smooth, open our system. At the same time, working on the shadows, feeding our demons, to do this as safely as we possibly can. Even then, there are challenges for some people, especially those we mentioned with dis-eases. Not, we risk dark night of the soul, Kundalini Syndrome. We do it to the best of our ability. It becomes safer. Driving a car isn't safe. We can still have an accident. There are still things on the road that can run in front of us. There are still other drivers that can knock us off course, crash into us. But if we control the car, if we know what we're doing, if we understand how it works, we are far safer than if we do not do this. So when I say we make it safer, I'm not saying we make it safe. We lower the risks. When we know how to stand sensibly in a shower, we lower the risk of slipping in the shower. When we hold the rail walking down the stairs and we pay attention to walking down the stairs, we lower the risk of slipping down the stairs. There's risks in everything crossing the street. If anyone says that any type of energy work is 100% safe, absolutely no problem. Do not touch them with a barge pole. Why? Because it's like saying crossing the road is 100% safe. It's not 100% safe. There are risks involved in everything. In chewing your food and swallowing, there are risks involved. What, you're telling me it's safer than chewing your food? You get it? Kundalini Syndrome mainly comes because people do not control the energy. They do not control the ego. They play around. If you play with matches, expect to get burnt. Right? If we do things, if we work the energies, if we train the energies, if we use systems of internal alchemy to help us release those programs that control the ego, not kill the ego, kill the programs that control it. Break the bounds and the bonds of dualism and limiting beliefs and traumas. That's not the ego. That's breaking the program. So we can use our ego to flow into safest places. Because we actually want the ego when we start to experience, for example, the bliss states. We want our ego to register the bliss states and say, hey, this is wonderful. And you reprogram the subconscious with these bliss states so you can hold these bliss states. And your ego is there holding the bliss state for you. And you're, wow, I'm living in bliss. I have a bliss program running. And your ego will keep it running for you and stay in the bliss states. Suddenly see how ego becomes our friend, right? And it looks for intuitions and things and coincidences that can take us further down the path. That's our ego doing that for us, looking for those things, finding them for us, if we work properly. It's not about ego death. It's about doing things sensibly. Kundalini Syndrome can be avoided. Dark night of the soul can be avoided for the most part, as long as you do the work properly. Now, obviously, sometimes you might think you've done the work and you haven't quite done enough work because you don't know yourself or you're not honest enough with yourself. And so things can come and bite you in the butt. Or you go to someone and they push you further than you are ready, which tends to happen, unfortunately, more often than it should, due to the ego or the things I've talked about, the types of people that do this, that are drawn to this. And you can be pushed too far energetically, which causes these things. Understand where you're coming from. Understand who you're working with. Understand what you're doing. Independent research helps. Comparing and contrasting different teachers, different masters. Understanding the types of people that do this type of work. Understanding whether they are on their journey of healing. Understanding whether they have a spiritual ego hidden within them, thinking they're superior than others. All these little things. How do you feel when you meet these people? Do they feel right to you? Don't overanalyze. Don't intellectualize these things. Does this person feel right to you? If it turns out they felt right and suddenly they've done wrong, you know your needle is off. You don't know how to judge people properly. You need to go way more basic. Grow. Heal. Understand these things. Get yourself prepared to avoid Kundalini Syndrome, dark night of the soul. It's clear.